for all intents and purposes, seems to have very little meaning or any relevance, even possibly to the Jews of the Exodus. And I'm referring to the first parashah, first section of Numbers, which is also referred to as Numbers, in chapter 2. And we will then move in from what I believe is a profound revelation of the Bible concerning many aspects, which ultimately will move us into the holiday that is coming shortly. I should say Holy Day, not, Holy Day you might also think I mean Holiday, and of course you know I'm referring to a day which is called Whole Day, Wholeday, which is the giving of the Torah, which is considered to be a very significant holiday, I believe only in theory, but not so much as in any practical sense. In chapter 2 we read, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, The children of Israel shall pitch by their fathers' houses, every man with his own standard, according to the ensigns. A good way off shall they pitch round about the tent of meeting." Now, I'm sure everybody present in this room understood every word perfectly. Not only you understood every word perfectly, but you even captured the full significance of the meanings of these verses. Well, then you're better than I am, because I didn't catch a word of it. And this is another demonstration of the corruption of the Bible, because, as I have always stated, along the way, the idea of the Bible turned itself into a religion. And as you know, the word religion, for the Kabbalist anyway, doesn't carry any weight or any meaning. But rather that the Bible is a cosmic code, and for reasons known to most of you, the Bible is concealed, and therefore it's called the cosmic code, and that it was left to the Zohar and the other Kabbalists to decipher and reveal that which is hidden beneath the literal words of the Bible. So we shall go and take the words and try to understand them as they are truthfully written. It says, Ish al diglo. It says a man with his flag. Now, what is the significance of a flag? While we know all countries of the world display a flag, cities display flags, where did the custom come from? And furthermore, what does it indicate? If nothing more, this is what I represent. Then why is it in the form of a flag? The next word, which seems to have no meaning whatsoever or any connection, is the word ve'otot. And forgetting about the translation, but otot means signs. And then the next two words is levet avotam, to your father's house. Now, for someone who is involved in astrology, at least the second two words will have a great deal of significance. You know about houses in charts. You know about signs of the zodiac. And so, once you immediately translate correctly, we are not corrupting the word, because otot means signs. And levet avotam, your father's house, meaning houses, as there are houses in the study of astrology. And furthermore, this word otot is also mentioned in the Torah for the very first time in the 4th day of Genesis 1, where there is a discussion of the sun, the moon, and the otot, meaning signs of the zodiac. Consequently, what this parasha, which, as I say, appears to be very insignificant only because there are so little commentaries on this particular section of the Torah, and it was really left to the Kabbalist, or more specifically Rabbi Shimon, to decipher the internal meaning, and consequently to provide us with further knowledge by which we can not only access into the awesome power of the cosmos, but maybe even begin to understand all that is around us, to understand how I can become master over my own destiny. And this is really what this entire section is about. It then goes on to say and state, and I'm not going to use the translation because it would confuse us, but literally what the words of the Bible is, Vachonim kedma mizracha degel machne Yehuda letzivotam, and that the flag of the camp of Yehuda would go first, and that he would be accompanied by 2 other tribes. What that obviously means, from a Kabbalistic point of view, we know what Mizrach means. It's a code word. It means the east. Some people, or maybe some Jews, and even if we have Arabs in the United States, will pray eastward, meaning they pray to Mecca or they pray to Jerusalem, because it so happens to be located in the east. For those who live north of those cities, pray to the south. And so they do not, or any further, this portion would not apply to them, or the prayer of praying towards, or the precept of praying towards the east already doesn't apply. But we know that the word Mizrach will never lose its meaning, and that's why the Zohar takes the word Mizrach, which means east, and deciphers it as a code word for the air sign. For the air sign. Kavam Tsai, the air sign. Meaning that the dominant sign in air sign is Yehuda, whatever Yehuda means. But in any event, when we discuss tribes, we are not discussing people merely as another congregation of people. Neither is the Bible concerned with the tribes of people, what they were called, but rather it is a totally coded message, I say totally coded message, to provide us with information on the formation of the cosmos, the formation of the signs, and how and when you can get a handle on this information. You then are no longer subject to the reading of a map of your own destiny via an astrological chart, but you rise above these signs, you rise above these influences, and you now become a master of your own destiny. So, on a very general basis, everything mentioned in chapter 2 of Numbers deals specifically with the aspect of astrology and what all the signs mean. And so we'll go right to the section that deals with this particular aspect, and that will be found again in Numbers in the Zohar, page 8. Ish al diglo be'otot. And you know we also read the Zohar in all of our sessions. For those who can read or for those who cannot read, I'll always encourage you to scan the words. All right, returning to the Zohar. Maybe I shouldn't mention every time the word Zohar and just merely go right into the text. Right? That word itself, Zohar, which means, of course, power and energy and light. Yeah. Okay. He goes on to explain the words, Ish al diglo be'otot, a man on every man for his flag and his sign. Elohim arba machnot shel Knesset Yisrael. These are the 4 camps, translating it literally, of the congregation of Israel. What does that mean? It means the 4 sfirot of Chesed, Gevurah, Teferet, and Malchut. It means the 4 basic elements in the universe. There are no more than 4. There may be different variations of 4, but essentially and fundamentally there are only four basic elements in the universe, and that is water, fire, air, and earth. These four signs become manifested as bottled up energies, because water, again, is a physical manifestation. So when we use the word water, what we actually are referring to is the sphira of chesed, a code word meaning sharing. And therefore, the reason that water seeks its own level and always seems to expand or spread out is for the obvious reason that it has an internal energy thought intelligence, which says that it has a characteristic of sharing. Therefore, it is known as by its code word chesed. Chesed. Fire is internally fired by the sphira gevurah, which means an internal energy thought intelligence of the desire to receive, meaning a negative quality. As you know, sharing is positive. It is referred to as positive, and drawing to oneself is the aspect of negativity. And then the code word for the third sign, which is air, which is the other component which exists in this universe, is known by the code word teferet, referring to as the air sign. And it is only by virtue of an air sign, that you can have a unified whole. It is like the atom. The reason the atom, until man has taken the atom and sought to disrupt the unification of the atom, which has only brought havoc. Maybe we haven't yet experienced the kind of havoc that ultimately the nuclear waste and etc. will, heaven forbid, bring on the universe. But nevertheless, the atom as a one unified whole intelligence consists of these 3 aspects. Proton meaning sharing, meaning the energy intelligence of Sfirat Hesed, and the electron as Gevurah, as the negative aspect, and the neutron, which is not exactly understood by scientists, but according to Rabbi Shimon, who I think did graduate from a credible university, said that the neutron is the energy thought intelligence of air. In other words, air is the sign that combines. Air is the sign that can combine and create a unified whole of positive and negative. Air sign, for those who have studied the Talmud Esses Sfirot, understand that the air sign represents the central column, and central column energy intelligence is one of resistance. In other words, by nature, any one of an air sign would have within them manifested the bottled up energy called by its code name Tiferet, which means instinctively. Now this could be good for good or bad, but instinctively, an air sign will be one who resists. One who resists. Could be positive, it could be negative. And consequently, when we mention air signs, and what is known about air signs is they love the freedom of being free. They can't be locked in. You can't lock them in. Now, why can't you lock them in? Why can't you lock them in? Because they are always resisting something that can create a framework around them. And internally, whether they are conscious of this internal aspect of themselves or not is not important, because unfortunately, most people operate, according to the psychiatrists, on a 5% conscious level. So there is 95% of us that, unfortunately, for those who are not involved in Kabbalah, which is certainly a gateway into tapping the 95% of our own consciousness, that this Tiferet, this sign of resistance, indicates that all air signs rebel against frameworks. On the contrary, they love to bring together positive and negative and create the framework of which these two will be included within their framework. But take an air sign and try to put them into one of the other, you've got bedlam. All right? Now, these four signs, and of course earth is man. Earth means man, meaning the recipient of whatever is flowing in the cosmos. That's the earth sign. Therefore, earth signs are stationary. They love where they are, hate to move, don't upset them. And as we've discussed this many, many times again, they are the signs that wherever they are, as bitter as it might be, as long as you don't pull the rug from under them, everything is fine, although it could be second hell, but it's beautiful. As long as you don't move the rug away. What's that? What are the earth signs? The earth signs are Shor, meaning Taurus. The next one is Betula, yeah, Michelle. But he also... It fits his character. That's right. Yes, he's a little air too. All right. And Betula, which is Virgo, and of course the heavy earth sign is Capricorn. How about the air signs? The air signs, for those who are not familiar, will be Gemini, which we are now entering. And we have entered, according to the sun sign, we have entered into the influence of Gemini. And tonight, from the moon aspect, tonight, we have entered into the domain of Gemini from the moon point of view. From the moon point of view. Also included is a Libra. And watch out for Libras. You've always got to watch out for Libras. I'm telling you from my own experience, watch out for Libras. They go so fast you can't catch up with them. Can't catch up with them. I have to tell my wife all the time. I says, don't give me so much at one time. It's too fast. They're too fast. She's Libra. Difficult. Watch out. And the third one of whom they subscribe most mental institutions, because most of the third air sign, which is Aquarius. Now this again, we are here all studying Zohar, and therefore we understand that when we're through tonight, we will rise above the influences. So nothing is really going to affect us.
Somebody has to work twice tonight, I guess.
Okay. All right? Now, the Zohar goes on to say, and giving us some more code names, because if you learn conventional astrology, I can assure you it becomes quite confusing. You know, it's like, and I'll refer to air sign of Libra, only because I'm a little more familiar with it. With all the experience, you learn from experience.
You're sharing something in common.
Yeah. I know. That's why we have this dialogue usually. A Libra is one that sees both sides of the fence very clearly, but so clear to the extent that they can never make up their minds. See how clear it is? It's so clear they can't make up their minds. But that seems to be a little contradiction, because when anyone can observe a total frame of an aspect, meaning all of the positive qualities, all of the negative qualities, I would then be led to believe that a decision should be a lot easier to come by, because everything is seen within, you're focusing in on everything that's included within this frame of reference. Why can't they make decisions? Why can't they make decisions? So this is a problem that one confronts astrology, conventional astrology. In other words, these are the aspects of Libra, and yet they seem to be contradictory. And I don't want to go through each sign to indicate that from a conventional astrological point of view, while the information furnished is at most times correct, however, they for whatever reason they can't seem to reconcile, two opposites. The positive and the negative seem to be so opposite of each other. How can one who cannot make a decision see everything? If he saw everything, he should come to a conclusion very simply. So the Zohar reveals another aspect. You remember now we have discussed water, let's say as a positive sign, as the sharing sign. We have another name for it called Chesed. It's the code name. Now the Zohar tells us that there is another name or names for these four signs. Names that are referred to as angels. They are as follows: Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, and Raphael. Okay? Four angels. Michael, if you're Sephardic, you love Michael, because it's the sharing, that Michael plays a very significant, in true Sephardim, a very significant role as something that one should live by. Michael meaning sharing. Gabriel, which is givura, which is negative. And again, when we associate signs with positivity or negativity, we must always bear in mind that without negativity, there is no circle. If I didn't have two poles in a bulb, I wouldn't have a circuit. So there is no question that the negative thought, energy, intelligence must always exist before we can appreciate or experience a circuit. So Gabriel is negative, and I say negative not in the sense of shlili, as we would say in Hebrew, meaning it's bad. It's not. It's a vital component of the unified whole. Uriel is the central column, and Raphael. And if your name is Uriel and you're an air sign, you got a lot of problems. Raphael is the earth sign. Raphael. Again, we have now four more words that the Zohar will go on to explain for us, but you now have another four names for the same thing. Now, obviously, the Zohar, where we find all of these varied names, because certainly in the Torah, all we did was translate the words of the Torah, and it was all hodgepodge, and we didn't understand the word. And suddenly the Zohar is telling us that all of these names and all of these thought, energy, intelligences are going to, and he derives them from this portion in Numbers. So it's not mentioned there for everyone to see, provided unless you have the zechut to read all of this from the Zohar. Now he says, these three aspects. We just said there was Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Malchut, known as Sfirot, and then he said there is the angels, right? All of these aspects, he says, represent Yud Bet Shvatim. They all represent the 12 tribes, and they all represent Yud Bet Givulim Saviv Savivla. Ki B'chol Echad, from every one of these 4 signs, Yesh Gimel Kavim. Because in every sign, and here is the clue, which was only recently discovered when the discovery of the atom and the revelation of the atom came into a known entity. And that means that every form of power, whether it's an air sign, whether it's a fire sign, whether it's an earth sign, or a water sign, it consists of 3 aspects, each and every single one of them. And therefore, we come to the conclusion, says the Zohar, when the Torah here is referring to the 12 tribes and their movements, the reason we are referring to the 12 tribes, because in essence we are only referring to 4 signs. There are only 4 signs. But each sign consists of 3 components, 3 aspects. Therefore, says the Zohar, when we read that, if I can say this was the east of the camp, there were 3 tribes. Why were there 3 tribes camped here? And who was in the middle? Yehudah. What about the other 2? The other 2 were there too, but that made no sense. What he's saying now is that Yehudah, or the east, or Mizrach, and he was dominant. Yehudah is dominant because he is the air sign. He is the major air sign because, again, if we take the atom, if we take an air sign, it consists of 3 parts. And the east is air. If the east is air, then it must have its other 2 components to be considered one unified whole. So why does the Torah say that there were 3 camped on the eastern side of the camp? To indicate to us that every sign is considered to be, even if it's an air sign, there will be an air sign that is predominantly right, there is an air sign that is predominantly air, and there is an air sign that is predominantly fire. And therefore, in Kabbalistic astrology, it's beautiful. Let's take the 3 air signs we just mentioned. Libra, Aquarius, and what was the third one? Gemini. That's right. How could we forget Gemini? We're in Gemini now. If you don't, then you'll have to familiarize yourself, and I don't want to teach you that right now because that is something you can learn on your own. There are 12 months. You will notice that each section of the 12 months, from a Kabbalistic astrological point of view, why are there 4? The 4 represent the Tetragrammaton, the most powerful channel by which we can control the cosmos. In fact, it's the only way you can control the cosmos. If we're referring to rising above the influences of the planets, if we're discussing rising above the influences of the signs of the zodiac, you must, as we will shortly learn again in the Zohar, you must have this kavanah. Kivun means you must know the structure of the universe, because as long as you do not know the structure of the universe, you cannot connect to these energy intelligences, because they are there for your bidding. To that extent, they are there for you to control them. They were only created, as it says in Genesis 2. Nothing moved. The plants were fossilized. Animals didn't move. The heavens didn't move. There was no rain. Nothing. The sun didn't shine. The moment man appeared, everything started moving. Why? To indicate to us that man is, in truth, the center of the universe, and he controls not only his own destiny, which he doesn't control for most people, but that he can also control the entire universe. The entire universe. Point of view, or Kabbalistic, there are 12 months. There were 12 signs of the zodiac. Each 3 months, let's say the first 3 months, which is, and nobody from a conventional astrological point of view knows why Nisan is the first month or why is Aries the first month, and all studies of astrology from all different cultures of the past, they will all tell you, you begin with the first month with the Aries. Why? We know why. Because the Zohar says, it is the month by which the Jew became an active determinator. Not until Exodus did he become an active determinator of the cosmos. So you have Aries, and you have Taurus, and you have Gemini. That is all in one package. All in one package. They are under the influence of the Yud. So in these 3 months, you would connect with the Yud of the Tetragrammaton. But getting back to the idea that within every sign, there are 3 components. We have 3 air signs: Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius. If you can, for a moment, or quickly, focus in, where is Gemini in the first 3, in the section of the first 3? It is the 3rd sign. It is the air sign. Gemini is the air sign of the air signs. Central column. Libra comes in the 3rd 3-month section, which is Vav. Where does it appear? Not by chance. It happens to appear as the first month of the 3. Why? Because Libra is the right column aspect of central column. It is the sharing aspect. And then you have Aquarius. Where does it find itself located? Not by chance in the calendar between Capricorn and Pisces. It's the negative aspect. Does everyone follow? So this will hold true for all of the 4 signs. All 4 signs were not by chance or without any conscious thought located, as here. Here they all were located in the camp, and the Torah has to tell me where they were located. Would it have made any difference to any of us here today whether Yehuda was on the east side or Yehuda was on the eastern side or he was on the western side? When you read this portion of the Torah, it makes absolutely no difference to anyone. In fact, I don't know whether it made any difference to Yehuda at the time. But if we understand that when we're discussing positions, it is to teach us that Yehuda was on the eastern side because they represent, or he represented, that Kavam Seir. Now, why were the 2 other tribes placed, says the Zohar, next to them? Because each sign, each of these 4 dominant energy thought intelligences, we call them signs, because they have already become manifested as 12 signs. But before that, they are Degel. They are Degel. What does Degel mean? The flag. Well, that again is true. It means what it says. Right? However, this Degel here represented 3 tribes. Remember, there were only 4 flags, 1 for each side. 1 for each side, to tell us that right, left, and central, because we have 3 tribes. Now you're going to have to recall whatever we've already stated. There are 3 tribes located on each side. Each side meaning what? The influence. If it was on the west, we know it means the earth sign. When the Torah is mentioning who is located on the west, he's referring to the earth signs. If he's discussing the north, he's discussing the negative signs. If it's on the south, it's the chesed, or positive side of the camp. And each one consists of three. Each three consisted of one unified whole. And therefore, in that calendar that we have, which seems to be insignificant for most people, I wouldn't even say most Jews, but most people in the world, where we have 12 months, we understand that each one was placed in its particular position so that we can understand what does Taurus really consist of. Is he just an earth sign? No. He's also located in the second position. He's also located in the second position of the Yud. He is a negative sign. Now, what is it? Is he negative or is he positive? Which is it? Is he also, meaning negative, is he earth, meaning desire to receive? Earth, that's earth. Only takes. That's the force of gravitation. That is what the earth sign is usually symbolic of. But he also is Gevurah. He is represented in the second stage to tell us that while you have three earth signs, you have Betula, you have Virgo, and you also have Capricorn. Know that there is a difference between the three. While they are all under one degel, one unified whole, but nevertheless each one is represented by another aspect. Each one has its own component. That we learn from here. So while Taurus, let's say, is an earth sign, but it is what part of the earth sign? Because every sign consists of three parts. Therefore, if we have questioned why signs seem, from a conventional astrological point of view, they seem to contradict each other. Now here you have an earth sign. In Taurus, it's very comparable. But let's take Virgo. Virgo is an air of the earth sign. Earth and air don't go together. How do you manage that? And yet we know that the earth sign of Virgo are people who are very meticulous, are very exact, are very critical, because they see things, they focus into things. They focus into things. Why does Virgo appear as an air sign? The air of the earth signs? Because Virgo is so critical, meaning they only focus in, and we know that the element of Virgo, what is the negative aspect of Virgo? They never see the trees from the forest. They focus in so well, and they see that one particular aspect so well that they forget everything that surrounds the area. They can't even see the trees from the forest. Therefore, Virgo was placed in an air sign position, as we said, to be able, as air is an unlimited, is a free kind of sign, to give the benefit that at the same time, while you are a Virgo for whatever reason, at the same time, you can also be an air sign. You do not have to be limited in that scope. So we can't say every Virgo has all of these negative qualities, mean they can't see beyond what they see. That's not true. However, this week's Parsha, again, it says, which seemed very insignificant, when did all this come about? And so I quote the first verse, and it says in chapter 1, "And the Lord spoke unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of the meeting on the first day of the second month." Is it really significant? When Moses received this commandment from God about the tents and everything else, it was in the second month of Taurus. Why in the month of Taurus? Why not any other month? Because the month of Taurus Taurus is the one sign, and it is not by chance, because in this week's portion of the Zohar, he calls Taurus Chodesh Ziv, the month when the most light becomes readily available is called Chodesh Ziv. When the most light appears in the universe. Therefore, we can understand why the month of Iyar, the month of Taurus, has always been either a very good month for the Jewish people, or it's been usually a holocaustic period for the Jewish people. That's why during this Sfirat HaOmer, many people think it's Avelut. But whether it is or not, but much of the Holocaust usually took place during this month. Why? Because it's so powerful a month, and if you don't tap and connect, it's like a live wire that's present, and if you don't know how to contain that energy, you get burnt out. But what is the significance of Taurus? Because it's an earth sign, and earth is negative, and it's also the second month, meaning it's Gevurah, meaning there is such consistency there. Whereas if you notice, we just said, let's say about Virgo. I hope I'm not going too fast for you, but Virgo, we said, was an earth sign, and yet where is it located in the constellation? As the air sign of the earth signs. Air sign, there's a conflict. In Taurus, there's no conflict. In Taurus, there's no conflict. In no other sign do you have such a perfect consistency as you will have in Shor. In Shor. Even Aryeh, even Leo, who is a fire sign, because it is the second month in the second, however, is considered a sharing aspect from another point of view. It is one of the Arba Chayot, which, if for those of you who are familiar with it, it's also representative of a conflict. In other words, there's right and left. The Taurus sign has a degree of consistency, and therefore it is called by the Zohar. For those of you who wish to refer to it, it's on page 3 of the Zohar in this week's Parsha. Hayu b'echod l'chodesh hasheni b'shan hashenit, v'chodesh hazeh nikra chodesh ziv. It's called chodesh ziv. Ziv means flowing of energy. Therefore, because it has that consistency.
Is it Gemini month?
No, Taurus month. Taurus month. Now, tonight, that's right, we went into Gemini.
And Leo is a sign of sharing.
That's right, it has both consistencies. Therefore, don't ever take the rug away from the Taurus, because it's all so comfortable. He's right there where it all comes, right? What's wrong? Is anything wrong? Even if it's all hell breaking loose, but why? Is there anything wrong? That is the...
So what is the rising sign? It could be a Libra, and yet you are influenced by
another. Okay, that's right. Now you remember we said we have different code names for the same thing. Now we're getting a picture that within each sign, says the Zohar, you can't take the sign just as it is. You must look at its position. And why was it put into that position? Because it also consists of that. If it's a Virgo, it can be Earth, and yet it could be the air sign of it.
Now, there's another subdivision within the month itself, within the sign itself?
Then there are subdivisions in the month, which we won't go into now, because it's not dealing with that.
Too complicated.
No, it's not complicated at all. It's only complicated if you don't know it. But that's right. But it's not complicated. Okay? All right? Now, you remember we discussed this idea of praying to the east, praying to the west. Now we understand that these four directions, we have Michael. Remember we asked, why do we need angels now? Names of angels. What does that indicate for us? Why does there have to be angels? The angels are code names. It says Michael. Says the Zohar, Michayel liyamin shehu darom. It's the southerly direction. In other words, the southerly direction is governed by Michael. What is the southerly direction? Chesed. How do I know it's Chesed? Because Michael is the right column of the angels. It's only a code name to tell us that he rules in Darom. Where does he rule? In Darom, in the southern part, anything that's south. Anything that's south. In other words, where I'm standing, to the south of me is where you can tap energy of Chesed. And however you're going to be praying, if you don't have these ideas, because we're shortly going to understand why we're praying to the east, and not that because the Bet HaMikdash is in the east is the reason why we pray to the east, because we know from a Kabbalistic point of view, no effect ever determines the cause. In other words, if the Bet HaMikdash is something of a corporeal matter, it means there must have been another metaphysical, conscious thought level that determined why the Bet HaMikdash would be in that location. But not because it's there and therefore we pray to it.
Who's determined the focusing point? I mean, who's to say where is the south? And where's
South, we always know what south means. It's always in that direction where the sun is at midpoint. At midpoint is south.
But if you don't take Mizrach first, then you direct
Mizrach is first. That's correct. Mizrach is first. Now you want to know why the sun rises in Mizrach. Did you ever ask that question? Did you ever hear anyone ask that question? The Zohar asked that question. The only reason we never heard in our schools or anywhere else, why does the sun rise in the east, is because who is going to give you the answer? So why bring up? I knew he was headed for a real Orthodox.
No, that's the answer to give you.
Oh, you're just quoting me the answer. Okay.
You know, Rabbi, I've been in schools where the Torah is on the west side.
What's that?
I've been into schools where it's not on the east, it's on the west.
Right. Well, they even have synagogues that you pray to the north.
Is there reasons for this? Or that they just didn't do it correctly, or what?
Well, I know there are many synagogues that it simply would be architecturally unwise, you see, to pray towards the east. So they wanted everyone to be praying towards the Torah, right? And architecturally, it didn't fit in. Maybe the entrances were on the east side. You don't want to, let's say they locate. So you wouldn't want people walking in from where you're praying. So you've got to make it on the. I've seen synagogues, Orthodox synagogue, but you have the entrance on the north side or the western side.
But that's actually incorrect.
I would assume it's incorrect because now we're learning something about directions. That directions were not created merely because there's a south and there's an east and a west. For what purpose? Now the Zohar is informing us that this business of encampment, telling us where they were encamped, is to tell us the significance of directions. That directions are thought, energy, intelligences. And so when we're going to pray, as we will shortly learn, to the east, there's going to be a reason. And that reason is going to tell us why the sun starts, why it rises in the east, why all physical manifestations arose the way they did is because thought, energy, intelligences, unseen, but like man, whose thought, energy, intelligences direct his activity. No, only an imbecile would perform an activity without prior thought. So is it with the universe. Before things became established in this corporeal fashion, there was a thought, hopefully there was a thought, energy, intelligence, because anyone in his right mind couldn't figure out how, while man may be unstable and his environment is unstable, but you look up to the heavens and everything seems to be working pretty much in order. So there is stability. Now, there cannot be any stability if there was not a prior thought, energy, intelligence. We know that from our own experience, that even sometimes where there is thought, energy, intelligence, we still mess up the situation or the progress of what we want to do. That's with all of this thought, this great thought of mine. Now, if we see something that has become so firmly established and remains that way long before we were here and long after we will be here, it seems there will be no changes in the heavens. So there must be a prior thought, energy, intelligence. What is that prior thought, energy, intelligence? Known as directions. Why things are located where they are. Why the United States is located even here. And why Israel is there. Why anything is where. Was it all by chance? No. What draws people here? I discussed that more fully in Wheels of a Soul. In other words, why are people drawn to certain areas and not to certain areas? Why are certain people drawn to certain areas and not to other areas? Is it all by chance? We seem to be so robotic in most things, and in this thing we're not robotic. I believe the psychiatrist is right. By and large, most of us behave in a robotic consciousness manner. We operate with 5%. Can you imagine all of the undertakings, getting married, opening up businesses, doing things, and we're operating with a 5% energy intelligence? It's frightening. And maybe that's why there's so much trouble, because people have not been capable of accessing themselves into maybe the 95%. And so we must live only by experience. But who learns by experience? Don't we make the same mistakes over and over again? So now the Zohar is revealing for us that the word Michael is liyamin. What does that mean? Liyamin, right? Darom. In other words, the southerly direction has a thought, energy, intelligence of sharing. And I must say, from my own personal experience, in my research, I have found that the people from the southern hemisphere are more in a tranquil, serene, sharing kind of mental attitude than those from the north. Now you know why. It's that simple. You don't need much research. Just read what the Zohar says. Why? Because there's a thought, energy, intelligence that dictates what that kind of environment is about. Gabriel mismol, litzafon. Now you know why most wars in the world occur where? In the northern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere of the earth. Why? Because it's gvura, it's negativity. And then we have Uriel. Lifneihem shehu mizrach. Uriel is mizrach. What is mizrach? What does it mean, mizrach? Mizrach means central column. Uriel is the thought, energy, intelligence of central column. So when we decide to pray in an easterly direction, and if you're praying in a northerly direction, well, why do you pray in the first place? So we'd have to get into that, and that. In fact, I must tell you, we won't have no time for it, but right in this parashah, right immediately following this discussion, the Zohar goes into what? Of all things, which seem to have no place whatsoever in this Parshat Bamidbar, one of the most boring sections of the Torah. The most boring sections of the Torah. In fact, wherever this is read on Shabbat, I assure you, there you will have probably most of the time taken up by discussions of other matters. Not related to the Torah.
Business and stock market.
Or business and stock market. Right. It just has no place here. All right? It has no place. However, why do we pray towards the east? And now we will understand why. Why was the Bet HaMikdash, or why was Israel located there? Because, well, it's only east for whom? For us on this side, right? What about the ones on the other side? In other words, should you live only on this side of Israel and not not on the other side. What about Har HaZeitim? While it's true, Har HaZeitim is where you bury the dead.
Does it matter?
What's that?
Linear direction?
Well, you take all the Kabbalists, they lived in the Galilee, which means they were praying Darom, but the answer is, Mizrach does not mean easterly, meaning because it's easterly for me. That means if I don't live in the United States and I live somewhere else, well, now you pray to the west, south, and north. Wrong. Wrong. We always pray to the east, because what is the east? What is the east significance? Says the Zohar, Uriel. What does Uriel mean? The energy intelligence of the central column. The central column which unifies and unites positive and negative, because if there is no unification of positive and negative, then you have Holocaust. If you have fragmentation, you have separation, you have destruction. So the vital component of the atom, the most significant and most important part of the atom, is the neutron. It is what keeps that electron moving around, almost coming to beat down the proton. Never seems to manage it. If you see pictures or read about the atom, that electron keeps moving around and almost gets close, but never there. Something pushes it back. What pushes it back? The thought, energy, intelligence of restriction. And it is not by coincidence that, for better or for worse, we are called Am Segula, the Jew. I mean the real Jew, because according to the Zohar, there are different kinds of Jews around the world. There are the ones that are despicable, there are the ones that are called the Erev Rav, and then there are some nice Jews. Maybe it's in the minority, maybe it's in the majority, I'm not measuring. But nevertheless, there are different kinds of Jews around, and we are called the Am Segula, from the word Segol, says the Zohar in this week's Parsha. Segol, the 3 points, if you know the Hebrew vowels. Segol is three dots. So praying to the east, and why the Bet HaMikdash is located not in the east, it's located where the energy center of Kavam Sa'i, of the central column, is located. Where is it located? In Jerusalem. And therefore, the physical Jerusalem, holy temple was located there only as a corporeal channel, a physical channel by which we can connect, not to the east, west, to the aspect of what they represented from a thought, energy, intelligence, central column. So when we pray to the east, no matter where you are, you're not praying to the east, you're praying to what east consists of. What is it? Says the Zohar, east is central column. East is known by its coded name, Uriel. And Uriel is the Malchut, our level of thought, energy, intelligence. Raphael la'achoreihem shuhu marav. And when all of this is done, when you have prayed, when you have connected to the central column, after, and don't touch energy. Does anyone ever want to connect with live energy? Or would you want to connect with tempered energy? The bulb is only useful provided it has a circuit of energy. If it does not have a circuit of energy, it is not only sometimes not useful, but it can also be harmful. It can blow. Pieces of glass can fly and so forth. So or marav or west means what? What does west mean? It means after you have established a unified whole of the 3 components, then you can draw the energy. Then you act like the earth signs. What does earth sign mean? Gravitation. Because all of the goodness, all of the real goodness in the world, I say the real goodness, not the stuff that is novelty that wears off in a day or two or three, but the real stuff that lingers on can only be had by exercising the central column. So when we are told by halakha to pray east, those who are in the north pray also towards the Bet HaMikdash, because that is supposedly the energy center. But the idea of praying east means praying to tap the kind of energy of central column, which the holiday of Shavuot deals with, which is what Shavuot, this holiday, which will come in a couple of days, is all about, and we'll move into that right after our break.